Single mom asks billionaire for help to buy food for her daughter. And what he does next is unbelievable. The rain beat mercilessly against the mansion's window panes. Outside, two small figures sheltered under the entrance awning, shivering from the cold. Diana held her daughter's cold hand and took a deep breath. It was now or never. She had rehearsed these words the entire walk. With every wet step, every drop that ran down her face, she mentally repeated what she was going to say. I need to buy food for my daughter. Simple, direct, true. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the entrance hall. She waited, counting the seconds. Zoe pressed against her leg. Her blonde hair stuck to her little face, pale from the rain. "Mommy, I'm scared," the 5-year-old girl whispered. "I know, sweetie, but everything's going to be okay." Diana lied. She didn't know if it would be okay. She only knew her daughter couldn't go another night hungry. Heavy footsteps approached from the other side of the door. A light turned on. Diana straightened her shoulders, trying to seem more confident than she felt. The door opened. A tall man appeared in the doorway, messy, dark hair, as if he had just woken up, grey eyes that looked like they had seen too much of life. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, but even so, there was something about him that screamed money. Julian Cross looked at the two drenched figures on his doorstep with an expression that mixed irritation and surprise. "It's almost midnight," he said, his voice rough. Diana swallowed hard. The whole speech she had prepared vanished. The words she had repeated 1,000 times in her head disappeared as if they had never existed. I... She looked down, saw Zoe trembling by her side, her lips purple from the cold. She saw the soaked clothes, the worn-out little shoes, the way the girl held onto her leg. And suddenly, the words came back, clear, necessary. Diana lifted her face and looked directly into Julian's grey eyes. "I need to buy food for my daughter," she spoke slowly, each word heavy with urgency. It wasn't a plea for a handout, it was a mother doing what she had to do. Julian frowned. "Buy." "I have money," Diana said, pulling a few crumpled bills from her wet pocket. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. "Not a lot, but I have some. I just need a place that's open." "The grocery stores are all closed and she..." Diana stopped mid-sentence, looking down. Zoe had taken a small step forward. Her light blue eyes were fixed on Julian with that brutal honesty that only children have. "Mister." The tiny voice cut through the air like a blade. Julian felt something tighten in his chest. "I'm hungry." 3 simple words. Spoken without drama, without tears, without manipulation. Just the raw truth coming from the mouth of a child who didn't know how to lie. Julian looked at her, too thin for a 5-year-old girl. Her disheveled blonde hair was stuck to her forehead by the rain. The clothes were clearly second-hand but clean, and those eyes. Bigger, trusting, looking at him as if he could solve all the world's problems. "Mister, I'm hungry." The words echoed in Julian's mind. It had been years since anyone had asked him for anything. It had been years since anyone needed him for anything other than signing checks and making business decisions. But there was a 5-year-old girl, wet and hungry, looking at him as if he were a hero. "Where did you come from?" he asked. "We were at the shelter," Diana answered. "But they said they couldn't keep us any longer. We left this morning." "And you walked all the way here?" "Yes." Julian looked past them at the dark and empty street. The rain continued to fall hard. "And where will you spend the night?" Diana hesitated. "We'll figure something out. I need to buy food for my daughter," she had said. "Mister, I'm hungry," Zoe had completed. Julian was silent for a long moment. He could just close the door. That's what he always did. Don't get involved. Don't care. Don't let anyone in. But the little girl kept looking at him with that innocent trust. He sighed. "Come in." Diana blinked, surprised. "What?" "Come in. You're soaking wet." He stepped away from the door, leaving space for them to pass. Diana hesitated. She didn't know this man, but Zoe was shivering beside her, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. "Thank you," she murmured, gently pushing Zoe inside. The entrance hall was enormous, marble floors, paintings on the walls, a staircase that led up to the second floor. Zoe looked at everything with her mouth open. "Leave your shoes there," Julian said. "I'll get some towels." He disappeared down a hallway, leaving mother and daughter alone. "So, Mommy, what a big house," Zoe whispered. "I know, sweetie. But remember what we talked about. We're guests." Julian returned with 2 soft towels. He handed one to Diana and knelt to put the other around Zoe's shoulders. "Is that better?" The girl nodded, pulling the towel closer to her face. "Come on," he said. "Oh, the kitchen is this way." They followed him down a hallway that led to a modern and immaculate kitchen. Julian opened the refrigerator and began to take out ingredients. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the table. Diana pulled out a chair for Zoe before sitting down herself. She watched Julian move around the kitchen with efficiency. "Don't you cook?" "When I have to." He put a pot on the stove and started chopping vegetables. His movements were precise, almost mechanical. "What's your name?" Zoe asked. Julian looked at her. "Julian." "I'm Zoe, and this is my mommy, Diana." "Hi, Zoe. Hi, Diana." It was strange to hear their names in his voice. "Do you live alone in this huge house?" Zoe continued. "Zoe," Diana chided her, "don't be nosy." "It's okay," Julian said. "Yes, I live alone." "It must be very lonely." Julian stopped stirring for a second. "Sometimes." "Why don't you have a family?" "Zoe," but Julian shook his head. "It's all right, I had one." "A long time ago." "And what happened?" "They left." Diana felt something tighten in her chest. There was pain in his voice. The smell of soup began to fill the kitchen. Diana's stomach rumbled loudly, making her blush. "Sorry," she murmured. "When was the last time you two ate?" Diana hesitated. "Last night." "At the shelter?" Julian nodded without asking any more questions. He continued cooking, but Diana noticed his movements became faster. 15 minutes later, he placed 2 steaming bowls in front of them. Vegetable soup with generous chunks of potato and carrot. There was also fresh bread and butter. Julian leaned against the counter, watching the 2 of them. "Eat," he said, then added more harshly, "Then you'll leave." The words came out rough, but Julian didn't know how to act. Doing the right thing felt dangerous. Diana looked at him, then at the food. She remembered the words she had said at the door. "I need to pay," she began. "Forget the money." She picked up the spoon and tasted the soup. It was delicious. Hot, perfectly seasoned, comforting. Zoe ate with a voracious hunger, spilling a little on her shirt. "Slowly, sweetie," Diana said, wiping her daughter's chin. Julian watched the 2 in silence. There was something in the way Diana cared for the girl that made him remember things he preferred to forget. "Is it good?" he asked. "It's wonderful," Diana replied. "Josh, you cook very well." Zoe nodded vigorously. "Very yummy, Mr. Julian." Mr. Julian. No one had ever called him that. It sounded strange. They ate in a comfortable silence. Julian served more soup when the bowls were empty. He watched Zoe smile for the first time since they arrived. "Thank you," Diana said when she finished, "for the food, for letting us in." "No need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You had no obligation to help." Julian didn't answer. He was looking at Zoe, who was playing with the last pieces of potato in her bowl. That's when she started to cough. At first, it was just a little tickle in her throat. Then it turned into a dry, persistent cough that made her small shoulders shake. "Zoe," Diana dropped her spoon, alarmed. The cough got worse. Zoe put her hand to her chest, trying to breathe between the fits. "She always gets like this when she's very tired," Diana explained, getting up to pick her daughter up. "It's asthma. We don't have the medicine." She rocked Zoe gently, whispering soothing words. She grabbed a coat and used it as a makeshift blanket, trying to warm her up. "It's okay, my love. Breathe slowly like this." "Very good." Julian watched the scene without moving. Diana hummed softly, stroking her daughter's blonde hair. Zoe gradually stopped coughing, but she was still breathing with difficulty. "Better?" Diana asked. "Better," Zoe answered with a hoarse voice, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "She needs to rest," Julian said suddenly. Diana looked at him. "We'll go. Thank you for the food." She stood up, still holding Zoe. The girl seemed smaller now, more fragile. "Where are you going?" "We'll figure something out." Julian felt something churn in his stomach. In this rain with her sick, she'll be fine, she always is. But Julian could see the worry in Diana's eyes. He could see how she held her daughter a little tighter. "I need to buy food for my daughter," she had said at the door. "Mister, I'm hungry." Zoe had completed with that tiny voice, and now here she was, ready to go out in the rain with a sick child. Julian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. He didn't want to get involved. He didn't want two strangers spending the night in his house. He didn't want to care, but it was too late. He sighed, defeated. "You can stay the night," he said, without looking directly at them. "The guest room is clean." Diana blinked, surprised. "Really? Just for one night? Tomorrow you'll leave?" "Of course. Just one night." "Thank you, Julian. Thank you so much." He nodded, already regretting it. "Come on. I'll show you where it is." They went up the stairs in silence. Julian opened the door to a cozy room with a queen-sized bed and an attached bathroom. "There are clean towels in the closet," he said. "If you need anything..." "We won't need anything," Diana assured him. Julian nodded and turned to leave. "Julian?" He stopped at the door. "Why are you doing this?" Julian looked at Zoe, who had fallen asleep in her mother's arms. Her blonde hair formed soft curls around her serene little face. "Because you said you needed to buy food for your daughter," he answered. And she said she was hungry. It was the truth, as simple as that. He closed the door and went down to the kitchen. He washed the bowls in silence, put away the food, turned off the lights. But even after going to his room, Julian couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about Diana's words. "I need to buy food for my daughter." It wasn't a plea for a handout. It was a mother doing what she had to do. And Zoe, "Mister, I'm hungry." 3 words that had changed everything. Upstairs, Diana carefully placed Zoe on the bed and lay down beside her daughter. The bed was too soft after nights on park benches. "Mommy," Zoe whispered in the dark. "Yes, my love." "Mr. Julian is nice." Diana smiled, stroking her daughter's hair. "Yes, I think he is. He made yummy food for us. He did. And he let us sleep in his big house. He did." Zoe yawned. "When I said I was hungry, he got sad." Diana stopped stroking her hair. "What do you mean?" "In his eyes. They look like yours when you're sad but trying to hide it." The little girl's words hit Diana hard. She kissed her daughter's forehead. "Go to sleep, my love. Tomorrow is a new day." But as she listened to Zoe's breathing even out, Diana couldn't stop thinking about the man who had opened his door to them. The way he had hesitated when she said, "I need to buy food for my daughter." The way his face changed when Zoe said, "Mister, I'm hungry." Julian Cross was a contradiction. Cold and distant, yet he had made soup for 2 strangers in the middle of the night. And Zoe was right. There was sadness in those grey eyes. Downstairs, Julian was still awake, listening to echoes in his mind. "I need to buy food for my daughter." "Mister, I'm hungry." 2 voices, one determined, the other small and trusting. Both had found a crack in the armor he had built around his heart. In a few hours, they would be gone, and his life would go back to normal, quiet, predictable, safe. He didn't know yet that nothing would ever be the same again, that that night would change everything, and that 2 blonde, light-eyed strangers had just turned his world upside down. The first rays of sun came through the guest room window, waking Diana slowly. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The bed was too soft. The sheets smelled like fabric softener. There was silence instead of the constant noise of the shelter. Then it all came back, the rain, the door, Julian. The rain. The man who had opened his home to 2 strangers in the middle of the night. Diana turned and saw Zoe still sleeping beside her, her blonde hair spread on the pillow like a golden halo. The girl's breathing was normal, without the wheezing from the night before. The rest had done her good. Diana looked at the clock on the nightstand. 6:30 in the morning. Too early for a child to wake up, but not for a mother who had gotten used to enjoying every moment of peace. She got up carefully, trying not to wake Zoe. She walked to the window and looked outside. The morning was clear, with no signs of the previous night's storm. The streets were wet, but the blue sky promised a beautiful day. Just one night, Julian had said. Tomorrow you'll leave. And he was right. They had to leave. They couldn't abuse his kindness. But before that, Diana wanted to do something. She wanted to show that they knew how to be grateful. She left the room in silence, barefoot so as not to make any noise. The house was quiet, wrapped in the peace of the morning. Diana went down the stairs slowly, looking around with new eyes. In the daylight, the mansion seemed even bigger, but also emptier. There were paintings on the walls, expensive furniture, everything immaculate, but it lacked life. It lacked family photos, personal objects, signs that someone actually lived there. Diana reached the kitchen and stopped at the door. It was beautiful, modern, with everything one could wish for. Granite countertops, state-of-the-art appliances, a center island that looked like it was out of a magazine, but it was also cold, too organized, as if it were used only out of necessity, not for pleasure. She looked around, thinking about what she could do. Julian had been kind to them, more than kind. He had offered food, shelter, safety. The least she could do was leave the house tidy. Diana started slowly. She washed the bowls left over from the night before, even though they were already clean. She dried each one carefully and put everything back in its proper place. She wiped the counter, folded the dish towels with precision. The truth was, she needed to keep busy. She needed to feel like she was doing something useful, something that justified the kindness they had received. Then she went to the living room. She straightened the sofa cushions, wiped down the furniture, vacuumed the rug carefully so as not to make noise. The house was already clean, but Diana wanted it to be perfect. She worked in silence, lost in her thoughts. How long had it been since she had done this? Cared for a real house, felt useful in a simple and honest way. At the shelter, everything was temporary. No one cared about making things nice. But here, in Julian's house, she felt at home. When she finished tidying the living room, Diana went back to the kitchen. She opened the fridge and saw it was well stocked, but with practical things. Milk, eggs, some cold cuts, food for a single guy who doesn't like to cook. She looked at the crumpled bills she still kept in her pocket. Julian had told her to forget the money, but it was hers. It was all she had, but it was hers, and she wanted to use it to say thank you. There was a bakery on the corner she had noticed when they arrived. The smell of fresh bread was still in her memory. Diana left a simple note on the table, "Be right back, D," and went out to the street. The morning was cool, the air clean after the rain. She walked quickly to the bakery, chose still warm bread rolls, golden croissants, some fruit, and 2 muffins that looked like they were made with care. "For a special breakfast?" asked the lady at the bakery. "Something like that," Diana replied, paying with the money she had saved. When she returned, the house was still silent. Diana started a pot of coffee and began to set the table. She used the nice plates she found in the cupboard. Napkins folded carefully. She put the bread rolls in a basket, the croissants on a plate, the fruit on a platter. She found jam and honey, butter in the fridge. It wasn't anything fancy, just breakfast, but it was made with care, with gratitude. Diana stepped back and looked at the table. The morning light came through the window, illuminating everything. For a moment, she could imagine what it would be like if this were her kitchen, if she could make breakfast like this every day. The smell of coffee spread through the kitchen, mixing with the aroma of fresh bread. It was the smell of home, of quiet mornings, of small joys. "Mommy," Diana turned. Zoe was at the kitchen door, her blonde hair messy from sleep, rubbing her blue eyes. "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" "I did." Zoe yawned, and then her face lit up. "Hi, what a yummy smell. I made a special breakfast." Zoe ran to the table, her eyes widening at the sight of so much food. "Wow, so many things. Is this all for us?" "It's for all of us, to thank Julian for his kindness." "Can I have a croissant?" "Of course you can, my love." Diana sat Zoe in one of the chairs and went to get a glass of milk. When she turned to bring the milk, she found Julian standing at the kitchen entrance. He had just woken up, his dark hair still messy, wearing only a grey t-shirt and pajama pants. His grey eyes swept slowly over the kitchen, stopping on the set table, the smell of coffee in the air, the domestic scene they had created. "Good morning," Diana said, suddenly nervous. "I hope you don't mind. I just wanted to—" Julian didn't answer immediately. He continued to look around as if he didn't recognize his own house. The kitchen was spotless, cleaner than it had ever been, but also more alive. The smell of coffee mixed with that of fresh bread. The table was set as if it were a family Sunday. Zoe was swinging her little legs in the chair, munching on a piece of croissant. It was everything his house had never been, cozy, warm, full of life. "You didn't have to do this," Julian finally said, his voice softer than the night before. Diana straightened her shoulders. "I know, but this is how I say thank you." She spoke with simplicity, without drama, as if it were natural to take care of the home of someone who had taken care of them. Julian approached the table slowly, still processing the transformation. "You went out to buy bread?" "I did. I used my own money," Diana said quickly. "The money I offered last night. I wanted to do something for you. It wasn't necessary. To me, it was." The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. Julian sat down slowly, as if he didn't quite know what to do with all this kindness. Diana poured coffee for him, placed a croissant on his plate, offered jam and butter. Simple gestures, as if it were natural to care for him. "Thank you," he murmured. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Zoe chattered about how well she had slept, about the dreams she had, about how tasty the croissants were. Julian just listened, drinking his coffee slowly. How long had it been since he woke up to the smell of food in the house? How long had it been since he had breakfast at a set table? "Julian," Zoe said suddenly, "do you have colored pencils?" He blinked, surprised. "Colored pencils?" "It's because I want to draw something important." "Zoe," Diana gently chided her, "don't bother Julian." "It's no bother," Julian said. "I think there are some pencils in the office. I'll get them." He got up and left the kitchen. Diana took the opportunity to pour more coffee, cut an apple for Zoe, and try to understand why she felt so comfortable in this house. Julian returned with a box of colored pencils and a few sheets of paper. He put everything in front of Zoe. "Will these do?" The little girl's eyes shone. "They're perfect." "Thank you." She carefully picked up the pencils, choosing yellow first, then red, and began to draw with her tongue sticking out in concentration. Diana and Julian finished their coffee in silence, watching her work. There was something hypnotic in the way she drew, completely absorbed. "She draws well for her age," Julian commented. "She's always loved it." At the shelter, she would draw with anything she could find. It must have been difficult. Diana looked at him, surprised by the gentle observation. "It was, but we managed." "And now? Do you have plans?" "I'm looking for a job. Anything will do, I just need a chance." Julian nodded thoughtfully but said nothing more. Diana wondered what he was thinking. "Done," Zoe announced, holding up the drawing. Diana looked and smiled. It was a simple drawing, like the ones all children make. A big house, flowers around it, the sun in the corner of the page, and 3 people in front, a blonde woman, a small blonde girl, and a tall man with dark hair. But they were all smiling. Big, colorful smiles, as if they were the happiest family in the world. "It's our house," Zoe explained. "You, me, and Julian, all happy living together." Diana felt her heart ache. "My love, we're not going to live here." "I know," Zoe said, already grabbing another piece of paper. "But I can dream, right? Wait, this one is special. It's just for Julian." She drew quickly, mainly using yellow and orange. When she finished, she got up and went to Julian. "Here," she said, handing him the paper. "This is for you to keep." Julian took the drawing and looked at it. It was him, or at least it was how a 5-year-old saw him. Tall, dark hair, wearing the same grey t-shirt, but he was smiling. A huge smile, painted in bright yellow that took up almost half his face. "I drew you smiling," Zoe explained seriously, "because I think you forgot how." The words came out with the brutal honesty of children. No malice, no intention to hurt. Just a sincere observation about the man who had taken care of them. Julian stared at the drawing without saying anything. His eyes traced every line at every color, the exaggerated smile Zoe had drawn for him. Because I think you forgot how... When was the last time he had truly smiled? When was the last time he had felt genuinely happy? Do you like it? Zoe asked, insecure about his silence. Julian cleared his throat. I do. Very much. He folded the paper carefully and put it in his t-shirt pocket, right over his heart. I'll keep it here, he said, touching his chest. Zoe's face lit up. Really? You're really going to keep it? Really? It's the most beautiful drawing I've ever received. Diana watched the scene in silence, feeling something stir in her chest. She saw how Julian touched the pocket where he had put the drawing. She saw how his expression softened when Zoe smiled at him. And suddenly, Diana realized something important. The cold, distant man from the night before was still there, but there was something different. A crack in the armor. A moment of vulnerability. The ice was beginning to melt. Julian, Diana said softly, thank you. For everything. For the food, the bed, the kindness we will never forget. He looked at her, then at Zoe, who had gone back to drawing. It was nothing. It was, to us, it was everything. Julian didn't reply, but Diana saw him touch his pocket again, where the drawing was. Well, Diana said, standing up, I think it's time for us to go. You've been very kind, but we've overstayed our welcome. Where will you go? We'll figure something out. We always do. Julian was silent for a moment. He looked at Zoe, drawing intently, at Diana, who was already starting to clear the table. At the kitchen they had transformed in one morning. For the first time in years, his house felt like a home. You don't have to rush, he finally said. Diana stopped clearing the table. What? You don't have to leave now. You can stay for lunch. Julian, we don't want to be any more trouble. You're no trouble, he spoke softly, almost as if he were talking to himself. Are you sure? Julian looked again at the drawing Zoe was making. Another yellow smile, another happy scene captured by a child who still believed the world could be good. I'm sure. Diana felt something move in her chest. Gratitude, relief, and something more. Something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Thank you, she whispered. Julian nodded and stood up. I'm going to take a shower. You two make yourselves at home. He left the kitchen but stopped at the door and turned back. Diana? Yes. The coffee was great, and thank you for taking care of the house. She smiled. You're welcome. It was my pleasure. When Julian left, Diana sat down again and looked out the window. The sun was higher now, promising a beautiful day. The ice was beginning to melt. She had seen it in his eyes, in the way he kept the drawing, in the invitation to stay for lunch. Julian Cross was not the cold man who had opened the door the night before. He was someone who had forgotten how to smile, as Zoe had so wisely said, but he was starting to remember. And Diana, for the first time in a long time, allowed herself to believe that maybe everything would be okay. Upstairs, Julian showered in silence, but the drawing stayed on the nightstand, right where he could see it. A smiling man, a man who had forgotten how, but whom a 5-year-old girl believed could learn again. Maybe she was right. Noon arrived with a generous sun streaming through the kitchen windows. Diana had spent the morning watching Julian interact with Zoe cautiously, but gently. He wasn't used to children. That was obvious. But there was something in the way he looked at the girl that showed he was trying. Zoe, for her part, had adopted Julian as if he had always been part of her life. She showed him every new drawing, asked about everything she saw in the house, and sometimes just sat near him on the couch, as if his presence were natural. I'm hungry, Zoe announced, dropping her colored pencils on the living room table. Me too, Diana said, looking at Julian. Can I use your kitchen to make lunch? Julian hesitated. You don't have to cook. I can order something. Let me cook, please. There was something in Diana's tone that made him nod. It wasn't a plea, it was a need. The need to do something useful, something that showed her gratitude in a practical way. Of course. Use whatever you need. Diana smiled and went to the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator, and what she saw surprised her. It was well stocked, but in a strange way. Quality ingredients, but basic. As if Julian knew what to buy, but didn't quite know what to do with it all. There was chicken breast, fresh vegetables, spices, rice, beans. Simple ingredients that, in the right hands, could be transformed into something special. Diana rolled up her sleeves and started to work. First, she seasoned the chicken with garlic, salt, and some herbs she found in the cupboard. She put it in a pan to brown while she prepared the vegetables. Carrots diced, zucchini sliced, onions sautéed until translucent. Zoe appeared in the kitchen, drawn by the smell. "Is it going to be yummy, Mommy?" "It will be, my love. How about you go draw a little more while I finish? Can I help?" "You can. Wash these potatoes for me." Zoe climbed onto a chair and started washing the potatoes in the sink, taking the task very seriously. Diana smiled, seeing her daughter so focused. Julian appeared at the kitchen door, drawn by the noise and the smell that was beginning to spread through the house. "Smells good," he commented. "It's just simple food," Diana said, stirring the chicken in the pan. "Nothing fancy." But Julian could see there was something special in the way she cooked. Every movement had a purpose. Every spice was chosen with care. It wasn't just food being prepared. It was care being transformed into flavor. "Di, can I help with anything?" Diana looked at him, surprised. "Do you know how to cook?" "I know the basics, but nothing that smells like this." "Then you can set the table. Plates, napkins, glasses." Julian went to get the utensils, and Diana noticed he chose the nice plates again. Not the everyday ones, but the special ones, as if this lunch deserved something better. 40 minutes later, the house was fragrant. The smell of home-cooked food hung in the air, mixing with the afternoon sun and creating an atmosphere Julian hadn't felt in years. Diana placed the serving dishes on the table. Golden and juicy chicken, sautéed vegetables that still kept their vibrant color, fluffy rice, creamy beans. Nothing elaborate, but everything made with love. "It's ready," she said, taking off the apron she had found in a drawer. They sat at the table. Zoe swung her little legs in her chair, eager to start. Julian looked at the food with an expression Diana couldn't quite decipher. "You can eat," Diana said, serving a plate for Zoe first. Julian picked up a fork, cut a piece of chicken, and brought it to his mouth. He chewed slowly, as if analyzing every flavor. Diana held her breath, suddenly nervous. What if he didn't like it? What if he thought she had used too much seasoning or too little? But when Julian closed his eyes for a moment, she knew she had gotten it right. "It tastes like..." "Hosgadi," he said, opening his eyes and looking at her. The words came out like a revelation, as if he had just remembered something he thought he had lost forever. Diana felt something move in her chest. "Home? Yeah. It tastes like when my mum used to cook, when I was little." Julian took another piece, chewing thoughtfully. "I haven't tasted this in years." He continued eating, each bite seeming to awaken dormant memories. Diana watched his expression change, become softer, more human. "Is it really good?" she asked. "It's incredible. How did you learn to cook like this?" "My mom taught me. She used to say that food made with care tastes different." She was right. They ate in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. Zoe chatted about how sweet the carrots were, how tender the chicken was. Julian just listened, but Diana noticed he would smile sometimes. Small, almost involuntary smiles. The house was different. Diana could feel it. It wasn't just them being there now. The house was changing too. The smells, the sounds, the feeling that these rooms finally had a purpose. The house was beginning to change, from the inside. "Diana," Julian said as they were finishing, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you end up at the shelter?" Diana stopped eating for a moment. It was a question she knew would come sooner or later. "I worked as a waitress," she began, looking at her plate, "in a small restaurant, but it was a good job. The owner was fair. The customers were nice. I could pay the rent for our apartment, buy food, clothes for Zoe." "What happened?" The restaurant went bankrupt. The owner tried to hold on, but the pandemic made everything difficult. Fewer customers, more bills. He had to close. Julian nodded, waiting for her to continue. I looked for another job, sent out resumes, went to interviews, but... Diana shrugged. Nobody wants to hire a mother with a young child. Why? They think I'll be absent a lot. That if the child gets sick and I'll leave, that I won't be fully dedicated to the job. Diana looked at Zoe, who was playing with the last grains of rice on her plate. And maybe they're right. If my daughter needs me, I'll drop everything. That's not wrong. I know, but you can't get a job like that. Diana took a deep breath. I spent my savings looking for work. When I couldn't pay the rent, the landlord evicted us. And you went to the shelter. We did. It was temporary, just until I could get back on my feet. But the weeks passed, the months passed, and yesterday they said they couldn't keep us anymore. Julian was silent, processing the story. There was no self-pity in Diana's voice, just facts. Just the reality of a woman who had fought and lost, but was still standing. And now, Diana straightened her shoulders, now I keep looking. Something will turn up. Are you sure? I have to be. She looked directly at him. I don't want pity, Julian. Not from you or anyone else, just a chance, that's all. The words came out firm, proud. Diana had told her story, but she wasn't asking for anything more than respect. Julian looked at her with new eyes. He saw a woman who had lost everything but hadn't lost her dignity, a mother who put her daughter first, always, a person who knew how to cook with love and turn a house into a home with simple gestures, and you never thought about giving up. Diana looked at Zoe, who was now drawing on a napkin, every day, but then I look at her and remember that I can't. She needs me on my feet, fighting. She needs to see that it's possible to start over. Even when it seems impossible, especially when it seems impossible. Julian nodded slowly. There was something in Diana's determination that impressed him. She had lost her job, her home, her stability, but she hadn't lost hope. What kind of job are you looking for? Any kind. Waitress, cashier, cleaner, saleswoman. I have customer service experience. I know how to cook. I'm not afraid of hard work. And Zoe? Who would take care of her? There's a public daycare near here. If I can get a job in the area, I can leave her there during the day. Julian was thoughtful. Diana had planned everything. She wasn't just waiting for someone to solve her problems. She was strategizing, looking for solutions. Can I have some more? Zoe asked, holding up her empty plate. Of course you can, my love. Diana served more food for her daughter, then offered some to Julian. A little more. Yes, please. It's really, really good. They continued eating, but now there was something different in the air, a mutual understanding. Diana had opened up, told her story without asking for anything in return. Julian had listened without judgment. You know, Julian said as they were finishing, it's been a long time since I've had a meal like this. Like what? Made with care, with someone to talk to, at home. He looked around the kitchen. This house has always been very quiet. And you like the silence? Julian thought about the question. I thought I did. It was safer, simpler. And now? Now I don't know anymore. Diana smiled. Sometimes it's good not to know. It leaves room to discover new things. Like what? Like the taste of food that hugs you. Julian laughed. It was a low, almost rusty sound, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. But it was genuine. Food that hugs you? Yeah. Food made with love. That warms you from the inside, that makes you feel at home. Your food really does that. Diana blushed at the compliment. Thank you. Zoe had finished eating and gone back to her drawings. Diana started to clear the plates, but Julian stopped her. Leave it. You cooked. I'll wash. You don't have to. Yes, I do. It's only fair. Julian stood up and began to gather the plates. Diana watched him, surprised. He washed the dishes with the same efficiency he did everything, but there was something different now. Less mechanical, more human. Julian, Diana said as he was drying the last plate. Yes. Thank you for listening, for not judging me. Thank you for cooking, and for sharing your story. They looked at each other for a moment. There was something new there, a connection that hadn't existed before. Mutual respect. "Mommy, can I play outside?" Zoe asked, pointing to the backyard visible through the window. Diana looked at Julian, who nodded. "Yes, you can, but don't leave the yard." Zoe ran out, happy to explore the green space behind the house. Diana and Julian stayed in the kitchen, watching her through the window. "She's a special girl," Julian said. "She is. She's strong, even though she doesn't know it. She teaches me every day." "Teaches you what?" "That it's possible to be happy even when things are difficult, that tomorrow can always be better than today." Julian watched Zoe running in the yard, her blonde hair shining in the sun. There was something in that image that moved him, the purity of childhood joy, the ability to find wonder in simple things. "Diana," he said suddenly. "Yes, you don't have to leave today." "What?" "You can stay another day until you find something." Diana looked at him, surprised. "Julian, I can't abuse your generosity." "It's not generosity. It's—" He searched for the right words. "It's humanity." They stood in silence for a moment, watching Zoe play. "Thank you," Diana whispered. "Thank you for the food, for the story, for—" He gestured vaguely. "For all of this." Diana smiled. "You're welcome." But in reality, it was for everything. For bringing life to that house, for showing that food could taste like a hug, for beginning to melt the ice around his heart. The house was changing. And Julian slowly was changing too. In the yard, Zoe found a yellow butterfly and watched it fly. She didn't try to catch it. She just admired its beauty, content to share that moment. Julian saw the scene through the window and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time: peace. And for the first time in years, the silence of his house no longer felt like a protection. It felt like loneliness, a loneliness that, perhaps, he no longer had to carry alone. Late afternoon arrived, with a golden light streaming through the living room windows. Diana was in the kitchen tidying up after lunch when she heard laughter coming from the living room. She peeked through the doorway and saw Zoe showing another drawing to Julian. The girl had settled on the large sofa, surrounded by colored papers and scattered pencils. Julian was in a nearby armchair, pretending to read a book, but Diana could see his full attention was on the girl. "This one is you driving a car," Zoe explained, holding up a colorful drawing. "And this is me next to you. We're going for a ride." "Where are we going?" Julian asked, leaning in to see better. "To a place with ice cream. Because every family needs to have ice cream together." The word family hung in the air for a moment. Julian looked at the drawing more closely, seeing the two smiling figures inside the colorful car. "And your mom? Where is she on this ride?" "Oh, she's at home making yummy food for when we get back," Zoe said matter-of-factly, as if it all made perfect sense. Julian smiled without realizing it. There was something in the girl's simple logic that was both touching and amusing. "Can I keep this drawing too?" Zoe's eyes lit up. "You can. Are you collecting my drawings?" "I am. They're very special." Zoe dropped her pencils and got off the sofa. For a moment, Julian thought she was going to get more paper to draw, but instead, she walked over to his armchair. "Can I sit here with you?" she asked, pointing to the arm of the chair. Julian hesitated for only a second. "Yes, you can." Zoe climbed onto the arm of the chair with a child's agility and sat there swinging her little legs. They were silent for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Julian went back to pretending to read his book, but he was completely aware of the girl's presence beside him. How long had it been since he'd had a child around? How long had it been since he'd worried if someone small was comfortable, safe, happy? "Julian," Zoe said softly. "Yes? Can I tell you a secret?" Julian closed the book and looked at her. "You can." Zoe looked around, as if to make sure no one else was listening. Then she moved closer to him, preparing to say something very important. "Mom, I've always wanted a dad," she whispered. The words came out simple, honest, straight to the heart. Julian felt something tighten in his chest. "You have," he said softly. "Yeah. Someone to call me little one. Someone to protect me. Someone to teach me things." Zoe swung her little legs, looking down. The other kids at the shelter had daddies. I only had my mommy. Julian didn't know what to say. There was a vulnerability in the girl's voice that touched him in a way he wasn't prepared for. Your mum takes very good care of you, he said. She does. She's the best mum in the world. But sometimes, Zoe paused, searching for the right words. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a daddy too. And what do you imagine it would be like? Zoe thought for a moment. He would be kind like you. And he would make yummy food sometimes. And he would let me draw on the living room table. And when I got scared, he would say everything was okay. And what are you afraid of? The dark. Not having a place to live. Mommy being sad. Zoe looked at Julian with her blue eyes, too serious for a 5-year-old. But with you, I feel like that sometimes. Like what? Like I don't know. Like you could be my daddy. Like we're a real family. Zoe's words hit Julian like a punch to the gut. He looked at the girl, saw the hope in her eyes, and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Love, pure and simple. It wasn't romantic love. It wasn't the love of friendship. It was something deeper, more instinctive. The love a man feels for a child who needs him. Zoe, he began, but he didn't know how to continue. I know you're not my real daddy, she said quickly. Mommy explained that you're just being kind, but... She hesitated. But you could be, right? If you wanted to. Julian felt his eyes sting. There was so much longing in the girl's voice, so much innocent hope, that he couldn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened his arms. Come here, he said softly. Zoe didn't hesitate. She slid off the arm of the chair and nestled into Julian's lap, resting her head on his shoulder. She was small and warm, and smelled of soap and colored pencils. Julian closed his eyes and hugged the girl carefully, as if she were made of porcelain. He felt her blonde hair tickling his chin, felt her calm breathing against his chest. Would you call me little one? Zoe whispered. I would, Julian replied, his voice hoarser than usual. And protect me. Always. And teach me things. Everything I know. Zoe sighed contentedly and settled more comfortably in his lap. Okay then, even if it's just for today. Julian felt a tear run down his face. When was the last time he had cried? When was the last time he had felt something so pure, so true? They stayed like that for long minutes, Julian stroking Zoe's hair, her idly playing with the buttons on his shirt. It was a moment of absolute peace. From the doorway, Diana watched the scene in silence. She had come to say she was making a snack, but she stopped when she saw Julian and Zoe together in the armchair. There was something about the image that made her hold her breath. Julian was holding her daughter as if she were precious, as if he would never let anything bad happen to her. And Zoe was leaning against him with the complete trust that only children have. It was love being born. Diana could see it clearly. It wasn't just Julian getting attached to Zoe or Zoe wanting a father. It was something bigger. It was a real connection forming between them. And for the first time since they had arrived at that house, Diana allowed herself to imagine, what if they could stay? What if Julian wasn't just a kind stranger, but someone who truly cared about them? What if they could be a family? The idea was both terrifying and tempting. Mommy! Zoe saw her standing in the doorway and waved. Look, Julian let me sit on his lap. Diana entered the room, smiling. I see that. What are you two talking about? About what it would be like to have a daddy, Zoe answered with typical honesty. Diana felt her heart race. She looked at Julian and saw that he was blushing, as if he'd been caught doing something forbidden. Oh, really? Diana said, trying to keep her tone light. Julian said he would call me little one, and that he would always protect me. Diana looked into Julian's eyes and saw that he was serious. These weren't just words to please a child. It was a real promise. That's nice, she said softly. You're not mad? Zoe asked, suddenly insecure. Why would I be? It's fine for you two to talk, because I know you don't like it when I talk about having a daddy. Diana came closer and sat on the sofa, near the armchair where Julian held Zoe. I don't get mad, my love. I just get sad sometimes because I can't give that to you. But now you can, Zoe said with simple logic. Julian is here. Diana and Julian looked at each other over the little girl's head. There was something in the air that neither of them knew how to name. "Things aren't that simple, little one," Julian said, using the nickname for the first time. Zoe sat up straight on his lap, her eyes shining. "You called me little one." "I did. I like it." "Can you always call me that?" Julian looked at Diana, as if asking for permission. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I can," he said. Zoe snuggled against him again, satisfied. Diana watched the scene with a full heart. Her daughter had never felt so safe, so protected, so loved. And Julian looked like a different man, softer, more human. As if that small child on his lap had awakened something that had been dormant for a long time. "Julian," Diana said softly. "Yes, thank you." "For what?" "For treating her like she's special." She is special. And at that moment, sitting in that room golden with the afternoon light, the three of them looked exactly like what Zoe had drawn so many times. A family. Real, imperfect, but full of love. It was love being born, growing, taking shape. And for the first time in a long time, all three of them felt complete. The next morning, Diana woke up with a strange feeling in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she had slept soundly, without worrying about the noise of the shelter, without wondering where they would be the next day. But that tranquility also haunted her. She couldn't get used to it. She couldn't let Zoe get used to it. As tempting as it was to imagine a life there, in that cozy house with Julian taking care of them, she knew it wasn't real. It couldn't be real. She got up early, even before Zoe woke up, and went to the kitchen. Julian was already there, drinking coffee and reading something on his phone. "Good morning," he said, looking up. There was something different in his eyes since the previous afternoon, since the moment Zoe had nestled in his lap. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "I did. And you?" "Very well." "Thank you." Diana poured herself a coffee and sat at the table. There was something heavy in the air, something she didn't know how to address. But she had to. She had to do what was right. "Julian," she began, her hands trembling slightly around the cup, "I need to tell you something." He put down his phone and gave her his full attention. Diana took a deep breath. "Last night after Zoe fell asleep, I was thinking, and I called a few places. Places? To look for a job. I explained my situation, asked if they had any openings." The words came out quickly now, as if she wanted to get them out before she changed her mind. Julian nodded slowly, but Diana saw something flash in his eyes. Disappointment. Sadness. "Air cleaning company said they can hire me to work as a cleaner in some offices downtown." "That's good," Julian said, but there was something in his voice that didn't sound convincing, as if he were trying to convince himself too. "It is. It's not a lot of money, but it's something. It's a start." "And when would you start?" "Today? If I want to." The words hung in the air between them like a heavy cloud. Diana stirred her coffee without looking at Julian, and he watched her in silence, trying to understand why this news, which should be good, felt like a goodbye. "Do you want to?" he finally asked, his voice lower than usual. Diana hesitated. The simple question carried so much weight. "Do you want to?" She wanted to stay. She wanted to wake up every morning in that sunny kitchen, make coffee for Julian, watch Zoe run through the halls of the house. She wanted to pretend they were a real family. But wanting and being able to were different things. "I need to," she replied, looking directly at him. "Why?" Diana took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Because my daughter needs to see me standing on my own 2 feet. The phrase came out simple, but was loaded with a meaning that cut the air like a blade. Diana wasn't just talking about working. She was talking about dignity, about teaching by example, about showing Zoe that even when things get tough, you don't give up. You don't depend on the kindness of others forever. Julian nodded slowly. He understood. He respected it, even if a part of him wanted to scream for her not to go, to stay one more day, one more week, forever. "And where will you live?" "There's a hostel downtown, temporary, until I can save up enough money to rent something." Diana said this while looking at her cup, unable to see his expression. Julian was silent for a long moment. The idea of Diana and Zoe in a hostel bothered him more than he wanted to admit. After seeing them safe in his home, fed, protected, the image of them in a strange place with unknown people made him feel a dull anger. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Diana hesitated for just a second, but it was long enough for Julian to realize she was fighting against something too. "This is what I need to do," she said finally. They finished their coffee in a heavy silence. Each sip felt like another step toward goodbye. Diana went upstairs to wake Zoe and explain the situation. Julian stayed in the kitchen, looking out the window at the yard where Zoe had played the day before, trying to understand the emptiness growing in his chest. Half an hour later, Zoe came downstairs with Diana. The girl was quiet, more serious than usual. Her blue eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "Are you going to work today, Mommy?" she asked in her small voice. "I am, my love. It's a new job." "And am I going with you?" "No, you're going to stay at daycare. Remember we talked about that?" Zoe nodded, but Julian could see she wasn't happy with the idea. In fact, she looked scared. "Julian..." The girl approached him, tugging on the hem of his shirt. "Are we really leaving?" He knelt to be at her level, seeing up close the eyes full of unshed tears. "Your mom got a job. That's a good thing. But I like it here. I like you." The simple words hit Julian like a punch to the gut. "I like you too, little one." "A lot." "Then why can't we stay?" Julian looked at Diana over Zoe's head. He saw the conflict in her eyes, the struggle between what she wanted and what she thought was right. "Sometimes people have to leave, even when they don't want to," he said softly. Zoe hugged his neck tightly. "Can I come visit you?" Julian looked at Diana again. There was hope in her eyes too, even though she tried to hide it. "Of course you can," he said, his voice hoarser than he intended. Diana went to get the few things they had and put them all in an old backpack. It wasn't much. Some clothes, the drawings Zoe had made, the colored pencils Julian had given her. "Ready?" Diana said, returning to the living room with the backpack on her shoulders. "I guess that's it." Julian looked at the small backpack that held the entire lives of two people, at the determined woman trying to hide her own fear, at the little girl clutching a drawing to her chest. "Diana," he said, standing up, "are you sure you don't want to stay a few more days, until you get better organized? Julian, you've already done so much for us. I can't abuse your kindness anymore." "It's not abuse." "It is. And besides, I need to do this. I need to show my daughter I can take care of her on my own." Diana straightened her shoulders, adopting the posture of someone who has made a decision and won't go back on it. Julian nodded, even though every fiber of his being screamed for him to do something, to say something that would make them stay. "Then I'll drive you downtown." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. At least this." The drive downtown was the quietest and longest Julian had ever experienced. Zoe sat in the back seat, holding her drawing and looking out the window as if she wanted to memorize every street. Diana sat beside him, her hands nervously in her lap, looking straight ahead with forced determination. Julian first stopped at the cleaning company, a small, simple building where Diana would talk to the supervisor and get her uniform. She got out of the car with the backpack and turned to say goodbye. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "For everything. No need to thank me." "Yes, I do." Diana looked at Zoe through the car window, then back at Julian. "You gave us more than food and shelter. You gave us hope." Julian didn't know what to say. He felt like he should say something important, something that would change everything, but he just nodded. Diana went into the company, and Julian waited in the car with Zoe. "Is she going to be okay?" Zoe asked in her small voice. "She will be. Your mom is strong. And you? Are you going to be okay, all alone in the big house?" The girl's question caught him completely off guard. He looked at her in the rearview mirror and saw genuine concern in her blue eyes. "I'll be fine," he lied. Diana came out of the company 15 minutes later, wearing a light blue uniform and carrying a bag with cleaning supplies. She looked smaller in that outfit, more fragile, but there was determination in her steps. "Did you get it?" Julian asked when she returned to the car. "I did. I start today. They went to the daycare, a colourful but simple building where Diana enrolled Zoe. It was a clean and welcoming place, with drawings on the walls and toys scattered around, but Julian still felt a tightness in his chest seeing Zoe there. Zoe said goodbye to Julian with a tight hug that lasted longer than he expected. "Don't forget me," she whispered in his ear. "Never, little one," he replied, feeling his eyes sting. Julian walked Diana to the first building where she would be working, a commercial building downtown, full of small offices and constant movement. "This is it," she said, standing on the sidewalk. "Diana, I know. You think I'm being stubborn. I think you're being brave." She smiled, surprised by his response. It was a sad but genuine smile. "Thank you for understanding. If you need anything, I know. Thank you." Diana entered the building, and Julian watched until she disappeared into the elevator. The drive home was strange. The car felt too big, too quiet. Julian drove on autopilot, lost in thoughts he couldn't organize. When he got home and opened the door, the difference was immediate and brutal. The silence of the house devoured him. It was a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to have its own substance. It was no longer the protective silence he knew and had cultivated for years. It was emptiness. It was pure loneliness. Julian closed the door behind him and stood in the entrance hall, listening to the nothingness. No laughter coming from the living room, no little footsteps running through the halls, no Diana humming in the kitchen. He walked through the house like a ghost, and every room seemed to echo with the absence of Diana and Zoe. The kitchen no longer smelled of coffee made with care. The table had no drawings scattered on it. The sofa had no messy cushions. Julian stopped in the living room and looked at the bookshelf. There was one of Zoe's drawings, framed among his expensive books, the drawing where she had drawn him smiling. He picked up the frame and stared at that bright yellow smile. When was the last time he had smiled like that? Julian went up to the guest room and stopped at the door. The bed was made, but there was still a soft scent in the air. Diana's scent mixed with the smell of Zoe's baby soap. He sat on the bed where they had slept, and for the first time in years felt completely, absolutely alone. For 3 days they had transformed that house. They had brought life, color, movement. A child's laughter echoing through the halls, the smell of home-cooked food, conversations during meals. They had brought love, and now they were gone, and he was back to what he had always known. Silence, loneliness, emptiness. Julian went down to the living room and poured himself a whiskey, even though it was only noon. He sat in the armchair where Zoe had snuggled the day before and closed his eyes. The house was silent, deathly silent. Julian opened his eyes and looked around. The walls seemed farther away, the ceiling higher. Everything seemed to have expanded in their absence. He got up and walked through the house again. He passed the kitchen where Diana had prepared breakfast with such care, the table where Zoe had drawn, the sofa where the three of them had watched television together. The kitchen was empty, clean, organized, cold, lifeless. Julian opened the refrigerator and saw the ingredients Diana had used to cook. It was all still there, waiting for skilled hands that knew how to transform them into something special. He closed the refrigerator and leaned against it, feeling the weight of the silence pressing on his ears. The silence is now unbearable. The realization came like a lightning bolt. For years, silence had been his refuge, his protection from a world that had hurt him. It was safe, predictable, controllable. But now the silence no longer protected him. On the contrary, before, the silence protected me, he said aloud, just to break the emptiness. Now it hurts me. His own voice echoed through the empty house, and somehow that was even worse, because it highlighted even more the absence of other voices. The lack of a child's laughter, of soft humming, of small conversations. Julian went back to the living room and picked up Zoe's drawing again. He looked at that smiling man she had created, a man who had forgotten how to smile, but whom a 5-year-old girl believed could learn again. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was work, always work. "Hello." "Julian, we have a meeting at 3:02. Are you coming?" He looked at the clock. 2:30. He should get ready, grab his keys, drive to the office. "No," he said. surprising himself. "What do you mean? No. I'm not coming. Cancel it." He hung up before they could protest. Julian sat in the armchair, holding the drawing, and let the unbearable silence envelop him. For the first time in his life, he hated the silence. He hated the loneliness. He hated the feeling that he had found something precious and let it slip away. The silence of the house was devouring him, and he didn't know how to fight it. He didn't know how to go back to living alone after knowing what it was like to have a family. 3 days passed since Diana and Zoe had left, 3 days that felt like 3 years to Julian. He tried to get back to his routine. Wake up, drink instant coffee, go to work, come home. But nothing worked like before. The food had no taste. Work felt empty. The house was just a space where he existed, without living. In meetings, he responded on autopilot. He signed documents without reading them. He made important business decisions as if he were daydreaming. His partners noticed the difference, but Julian didn't care. On the morning of the 4th day, Julian woke up and asked himself the same question he had been asking since they left. What was he doing with his own life? He got up, showered, got dressed for work. But when he got to the garage, instead of taking the highway to the office, he drove downtown. He needed to see them. He needed to know if they were okay. He needed to admit to himself what he had discovered in those empty days of loneliness. Julian parked in front of the commercial building where Diana worked. It was an ordinary building, with a constant flow of people coming and going. He went up to the 3rd floor and asked the receptionist for her, the new cleaner, Diana. "She's cleaning the office at the end of the hall," the receptionist said, pointing with her finger. Julian walked down the quiet hallway, hearing the muffled sound of a vacuum cleaner coming from one of the rooms. He stopped at the ajar door and saw her. Diana was with her back to him, wearing the company's blue uniform, vacuuming the floor of a small office. There was something about the image that squeezed his heart. It wasn't pity. It was pure admiration. She was there, doing what she needed to do to rebuild her life, without complaining, without giving up. "Diana," he said, knocking lightly on the door. She turned, surprised, and turned off the vacuum. "Julian, what are you doing here? I needed to see you." Diana began to wind the vacuum cord, trying to keep busy. "Did something happen?" "Yes, it did." She stopped tidying up and looked at him attentively. "What?" Julian took a deep breath. He had rehearsed these words the whole way there, but now that he was in front of her, they seemed too small for what he felt. "You knocking on my door was the best thing that ever happened to me," he began, his voice firm but filled with emotion. Diana stood still, just listening. "When you left, I missed you, and you only miss something when something good is gone." The words came out simple and honest. Julian didn't try to embellish or dramatize. He just told the truth he had discovered in those terrible days of silence. Diana crossed her arms, adopting a defensive posture. "Julian, let me finish. Please." She nodded, but Julian saw the tension in her shoulders. "I lived alone for years. I thought that was how things had to be. I thought I was protected, that I was safe." Julian took a step toward her. "But you came and changed everything. Not just the house, had you changed me." "Julian, we can't just... Why not?" The direct question caught Diana off guard. She searched for arguments, but they seemed to elude her. "Because it's not real. You feel this way now, but it will pass. These things pass, and when it does, where will we be?" "My daughter can't go through that again." Julian nodded thoughtfully. "You're right, she can't." Diana relaxed a little, thinking he had understood and given up. "That's why I want it to be real," Julian continued, surprising her. "What do you mean? Like a real family, not guests, not temporary charity." "Family?" Diana was silent for a long moment, processing his words. Julian could see the struggle in her blue eyes, desire against reason, hope against the fear of getting hurt again. "You don't know what you're saying," she finally said, her voice lower. "Yes, I do. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I'm saying. You barely know us." "I know enough." Julian took another step closer. "I know that you make coffee with care, that you take care of the house as if it were your own, that you love your daughter more than your own life. That you're brave enough to knock on a stranger's door when you need to. Diana shook her head. That's not how things work, Julian. You can't just decide to have a family. Why not? Because... She searched for solid arguments, but they seemed to dissolve in the face of his determination. Julian took another step, standing very close to her now. He could see every detail of her face, the tiredness in her eyes, but also something more, hope fighting not to be crushed by fear. Diana, if you're coming back, it's as family, he said with total conviction. I don't want guests in my house anymore. I want family. And what if it doesn't work out? And what if it does? Diana looked at him, seeing something different in his grey eyes. It wasn't just longing or loneliness. It was certainty. It was a determination she had never seen before. My daughter can't live like a guest, she said, testing his resolve. She won't. She'll live as a daughter. The words came out with a naturalness that surprised them both. Julian hadn't planned to say exactly that, but the moment the words left his lips, he knew they were true. Diana felt her eyes sting. Julian, I never believed in love, he said, interrupting her gently. Julian took her hand, feeling the rough skin from her work, but also the strength in those small fingers. I thought it was a weakness. I thought it was something from movies, from books. That intelligent people didn't let themselves get carried away by it. Diana waited for him to continue, her hand warm in his, but I was wrong. Julian squeezed her hand carefully. You showed me that love is strength. It's courage. It's a mother knocking on a stranger's door because her daughter is hungry. It's working hard to set the right example. Diana felt a tear run down her face. It's a 5-year-old girl believing that a bitter man can learn to smile again. Julian looked directly into her eyes. I want to try. With you. Try what? To be a family. To be the father Zoe always wanted. To be the man you deserve. To be truly happy. Diana looked at their joined hands, hers, small and marked by work. His, large and gentle, holding hers as if she were precious. And what if you get tired of us? What if you get tired of me? She smiled for the first time since he arrived. Zoe will never get tired of you. She loves you. And you? The question hung in the air between them. Diana looked into Julian's grey eyes and saw vulnerability there, genuine fear, fragile hope. I've grown attached to you too, she admitted softly. Then why don't we try? Diana released his hand and walked to the small office window. Below, she saw the bustle of the city, people rushing from one place to another, each minding their own business. Where is Zoe now? Julian asked. At daycare. She'll be there until 6. Can we pick her up together? Diana turned to him. She saw sincerity in his eyes, determination in his posture. She saw a man who had made a decision and was not going to back down. Julian, this is crazy. It is, but it's the sanest craziness of my life. They looked at each other in silence, Diana weighing her fears against her dreams, Julian waiting for her answer with a racing heart. If it goes wrong, she began. It won't. You can't be sure. Yes, I can, because I've never wanted anything so much in my life. Never. Diana closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she had made a decision that would change everything. If we're coming back, it has to be as family. My daughter can't live like a guest. She'll be my daughter too, if she wants. And me. Julian approached her again. You will be my partner, my companion. The woman who taught me that it's possible to start over at 40. Diana looked at him for a long moment. She saw sincerity in his eyes, love growing with every word. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. But I'm more scared of letting you go again. Diana thought of Zoe, of how the girl had shone in Julian's house, of how she had felt safe, protected, loved. She thought of herself, of how good it had been to take care of that house, to be part of something bigger than her own struggle. She thought of the loneliness she had seen in Julian's eyes when they left. Zoe always wanted a dad, she said, almost in a whisper. And I always wanted a family. I just didn't know it. Diana looked at him, then imagined Zoe running through the halls of Julian's house, drawing at the living room table, snuggled in his lap on the big sofa. "Then let's try," she finally said, her voice firmer now. "Together." Julian smiled, a real, full smile, just like Zoe had drawn for him. Together. They hugged right there in the middle of that small office, surrounded by cleaning supplies and office furniture. It wasn't the most romantic place in the world, but it was their moment, the moment they decided to stop being afraid and start living. "Should we go get our daughter?" Julian asked, liking how the words sounded. Diana smiled upon hearing "our daughter." "Let's go get our daughter." Weeks later, life had found a rhythm in Julian's house. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of adjustment, small arguments about rules and responsibilities, nights where Zoe tested the limits to see how far she could go. But it was real. It was family. Diana woke up early to make breakfast for the three of them. Julian had insisted she didn't need to work as a cleaner, but she wanted to contribute somehow. So she cooked, took care of the house, and sometimes helped Julian with administrative matters for his businesses. Zoe had adapted to her new life as if she had always belonged in that house. She drew at the living room table, ran through the halls, and every night she snuggled between Diana and Julian on the big sofa to watch a movie. It was a Saturday morning when Julian woke up with a smile on his face, something that happened frequently now. He went down to the kitchen and found Diana making pancakes, Zoe sitting at the center island, still in her pajamas, swinging her little legs. "Good morning, family," Julian said, kissing the top of Zoe's head and giving Diana a soft kiss on the lips. "Good morning," Diana replied, smiling. She was still surprised by how natural this routine felt, as if they had always been like this. "Julian, can you help me with something after breakfast?" Zoe asked. "Of course, little one. What is it?" "I want to draw our family, but I don't know how to draw happiness," Julian laughed. "Now what do you mean?" "It's just that everyone is always smiling in my drawings, but I want to draw the happiness that's inside here," she pointed to her chest. "You know, the kind you feel but can't see." Diana stopped stirring the pancakes and looked at her daughter. Sometimes Zoe said things that surprised her with their depth. "I'll think about how I can help you with that," Julian said, affectionately tapping her nose. After breakfast, Julian stood up and grabbed the car keys. "Want to go for a ride?" he asked. "Where to?" Diana wanted to know. "It's a surprise." Zoe clapped her hands, excited. "I love surprises." They drove for 15 minutes until they reached a commercial street downtown. Julian parked in front of a small building with windows covered in brown paper. "What is this place?" Diana asked, getting out of the car. "Come and see," Julian said, taking a key from his pocket. He opened the door and turned on the lights. The revealed space made Diana gasp in surprise. It was a small but perfectly designed restaurant. There were about 15 light wood tables, comfortable chairs, an open kitchen where customers could see the food being prepared. The walls were painted a warm shade of yellow, and there were hanging plants near the windows. But what caught her attention the most was the sign on the back wall, still covered by a cloth. "Julian, what is this?" Diana asked, her voice trembling. "This restaurant is yours," he said simply. Diana stood in the middle of the room, trying to process what she had just heard. "What do you mean, mine? You cook with soul. The world needs that." Julian approached her. "You always talk about how much you loved working at the restaurant, how you loved seeing people happy, eating food made with care." "Julian, I can't accept this." "It's not charity," he said, interrupting her. "It's an investment. I believe in you. I believe in your food. I believe you can do something special here." Zoe was running between the tables, exploring every corner. "Mommy, look at this cool place. Are you going to cook here?" Diana was still in shock. "Julian, this must have cost a fortune. Don't worry about money. Worry about making food that hugs people." Julian went to the back wall and pulled the cloth covering the sign. Diana read it aloud, her voice breaking. "Heart on the table. Below, in smaller letters, real food, love served warm." Diana covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes filling with tears. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Do you like the name?" Julian asked nervously. "I thought of several options, but this one seemed right. It's about you. It's about how you cook. It's about what you bring to people." Diana couldn't answer. She just nodded, tears streaming freely down her face. Zoe stopped running and came over to them. "Mommy, why are you crying?" "They're happy tears, my love," Diana managed to say. "Oh, good. I thought you didn't like it." Julian took Diana's hands. "I know it's a lot. I know you like to do things on your own, but let me help. Let me be a part of your dreams, too." Diana looked around again. She saw tables full of families, friends, couples. She saw steam rising from the open kitchen. She saw smiles, conversations, life happening around the food she would prepare. "It's perfect," she whispered. "So you accept?" "I accept, but on one condition." "Which is?" "You'll be my real partner, not a silent investor. A partner. We'll do this together." Julian smiled. Together? Zoe had found some forgotten colored pencils on one of the tables and was already drawing. "What are you doing over there, little one?" Julian asked. "I'm drawing what happiness looks like on the inside," she said, pointing to her chest. "I figured out how to do it." "How?" "You just have to draw people taking care of each other." Diana and Julian looked at each other. Sometimes Zoe surprised them with the wisdom she carried. "Can I suggest a few things for the menu?" Julian asked. "Of course." "What?" "That soup you made on the first night. The chicken with vegetables that tastes like home." "The breakfast you prepared with so much care." Diana laughed. "You want me to put breakfast on the menu?" "Why not? Breakfast from the heart. Family pancakes. Coffee that hugs. Are you serious?" "Completely. Food has no schedule when it's made with love." Diana walked to the open kitchen and ran her hand over the counter. She could picture herself there, preparing food for people who arrived tired and left nourished, not just in body but in soul. "When can it open?" she asked. "Whenever you're ready. You need to hire some staff, test recipes, make a few adjustments. I'd say in a month, maybe 2. Diana nodded, still processing everything. "It's going to be a lot of work. We'll handle it. The 3 of us together. The 3 of us. Zoe will be our dessert consultant. She knows her sweets." "That's right," Zoe said, looking up from her drawing. "I know a lot about sweets," Diana laughed, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just the realization of a dream. It was the feeling of building something together with the people she loved. "You 2 are crazy," she said. "And you love us anyway," Julian replied, pulling her into a hug. "I do." They stood there for a few minutes, Diana imagining what it would be like to work in that space. Julian thinking how good it would be to see her fulfilled. Zoe drawing happiness in the form of a family. "Dad!" Zoe suddenly shouted. Julian turned automatically, then froze. Zoe had never called him that before. It was always Julian or sometimes Mr. Julian. "Dad, come see my new drawing," she repeated, waving for him to come closer. Julian stood still for a second, processing what he had just heard. Then he walked slowly over to Zoe, his eyes already welling up. "You called me Dad," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Zoe looked at him with that naturalness that only children have. "Because you are." The simple words struck Julian like a lightning bolt. He knelt and hugged Zoe with all the emotion he felt, trying not to cry in front of her. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure. You take care of me, you play with me, you protect me. That's what dads do, right?" Julian nodded, unable to speak. "And now you gave Mommy a restaurant. That's a very dad thing to do." He laughed through his tears. "Is it?" "It is. Only dads do important things like that for the family." Julian looked at Diana, who was standing near the kitchen, also with teary eyes, watching the most important scene of their lives. "Gerd, you're going to have the best of everything," Julian said to Zoe, his voice firm despite the emotion. "I promise." "I already have it," she said, settling into his lap. "I have you and Mommy." Diana came over and joined the hug. The 3 of them stood there in the middle of the empty restaurant, which was full of dreams and possibilities. "Look at my drawing," Zoe said, holding up the paper. It was a simple drawing, like all the ones she made, but this one was special. It showed 3 people holding hands, smiling, and around them, Zoe had drawn little hearts floating in the air. "This is what happiness looks like," she explained. "It comes out of our hearts and floats around for everyone to see." Diana looked at the drawing, then at Julian holding Zoe, then at the restaurant around them. Zoe was right. Happiness was there, visible, palpable, in their smiles, in their hugs, in the dreams that were coming true. It's more than a restaurant, Diana thought. It's a future. It's a place where we will grow together, work together, be a family together. Do you know what this means? Diana asked. What? Julian and Zoe asked at the same time. It means we're going to have to learn how to make the most delicious food in town. That'll be easy, Zoe said. Mommy already knows how to cook with her heart. Julian smiled, his eyes still misty. And now she can teach everyone. Diana watched them, her daughter on the lap of the man who had become her father, both looking at her with so much love she could barely stand so much happiness. Now they were a family for real, not a family that had been formed by chance or necessity, but a family that had chosen to love each other, that had decided to build something together, a family that had a restaurant to run, dreams to fulfill, and a lot of love to give to the world. Heart on the table, Diana said aloud, testing the name. Do you really like it? Julian asked. I love it. It's perfect. And it was. Because that restaurant wasn't just going to serve food, it was going to serve love. It was going to serve hope. It was going to serve as proof that families can be born in the most unexpected ways, and that love, when it's real, always tastes like home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.